Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. Today we're going to do part two of a very popular story titled My Wife Lied About the Affair I Forgave Her For 13 Years Ago. And I subtitled this, The Truth Will Set You Free. And you'll see why as we get into the story. But before we jump into today's story, I wanted to do a quick recap of part one. And if you haven't watched part one, I strongly encourage you to do so. It's a great story and it sets the stage very nicely for what we're going to cover in today's story. But just to recap quickly, the story that this gentleman tells is about he and his wife. They met when they were 19 years old. They got married very young at age 20. They had their first child at age 21, their second child at age 22. He was working in customer service. He got a promotion to supervisor of the customer service department for this internet service provider he was working for, and that gave him enough money to enable his wife to stay home and raise their kids. They next bought a starter house in a nice neighborhood. So things were going very well for him, he felt. You know, his career was progressing. He had a beautiful family. He had a loving wife. He had a great extended family, and he was on top of the world until one day he got a voicemail message at the office from a woman, and he gave her the name Mrs. Jones, and she was the wife of one of his wife's ex-coworkers. And when he called her back, she gave him the unfortunate news that his wife was having an affair with her husband. And she conveyed to him that her husband had confessed that they had been talking for more than a year, but that the affair only turned physical within the last week. Now, what he did was he bought that story. He went home, he confronted his wife. She admitted to it because her lover had already called her and tipped her off that, hey, you know, our affair's been discovered. My wife knows about it, and she called your husband. So she, you know, confessed to him. She begged him to not leave her, and he decided to stay with her. He, you know, at first was thinking about divorce, but then he changed his mind, probably because of the two young children that they had, and because he did love his wife. So he stayed with her, but for 2 years, they lived a lie. What they did was he decided, hey, I don't want anybody to know about this affair. I just want to keep it between us. But he really had a hard time, you know, coming back to her in terms of his affection and intimacy. In fact, he really treated her coldly and didn't want to be around her. And he even said, I grew to hate her. So for 2 years, they lived this lie. And he told how, you know, he and his wife slept in, you know, their master bedroom, and she kept all her clothes there, and they would retire to the bedroom every night to give the impression to their kids and other family members that, you know, they were still together, everything was fine. And then once, you know, everybody settled in for the night, he would have his wife leave the bedroom and go and sleep in the spare bedroom. And they did that for 2 years. And also when they were at family events and so forth, they were very, you know, loving and giving each other pecks on the lips and hugging and so forth. But then when they went home and behind the scenes, he was totally cold to her, hardly spoke to her, tried to avoid her. So it was really a purgatory type situation. He said until one Saturday, he was out in the garage, he was putting up some shelves, he got into a predicament where he needed another set of hands to help him out. He called his wife out. She was very happy to help because he had never asked her to do anything for 2 years, if you can believe that. And she was helping him there. They got really close. One thing led to another. They ended up making love. And he said that was the first day of what he titled their second marriage. Now, they never got divorced, like I said, but they had that 2 year period where they were living in purgatory. But he said once they had that magical Saturday and they got back together, they fell back in love. And he said it has been 11 years of pure bliss. He said his wife was the greatest, the greatest mother. He couldn't ask for anything more. Where we left part one, though, was a big cliffhanger where he was about to get some additional news about the affair that happened 13 years ago that's going to change his life. So let's get into it now and find out what that information is and how he receives it. So, Life Implosion number 2, he titles it. The Return of Mrs. Jones. Now, again, Mrs. Jones is not a villain here. She is a victim. She's a betrayed spouse, just like the poster of this story is. So I don't want to give that impression. She is definitely a victim of this affair, just like the poster. He says, my world once again imploded earlier today. It's Saturday morning, 9/3/22. So just a couple of days before Labor Day this year. And I was shopping at a large home improvement store. A woman approached me and said my name. I said yes. She then said her first and last name. I didn't recognize the face or the name she gave. However, her voice sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. She then said, you remember me by my former last name of Jones? And I immediately knew who she was, although we had never met in person and only talked on the phone that one time. So he never followed up with her. He just got that information, where she said, hey, our spouses are having an affair. My husband confessed, and he went home, confronted his wife, and never followed up with this woman again. And I guess she never reached out to him. He says, I was taken back, as I always assumed she and her husband were around our age. And if you remember, he said he and his wife now are 38. But while attractive, she appeared to be much older. My guess was late 50s. Mrs. Jones said she recognized me from some of my online photos. She then asked how things turned out for me. I told her we reconciled and have been happily married ever since. Her facial expression conveyed surprise. I felt awkward, and the only thing I could think to say back to her was, I'm so sorry for my wife's actions. She said, don't apologize. We were married to 2 demons. She then told me things that will forever change my life. So Mrs. Jones told him things that will ever change his life. And we're going to find out what they are right now. She said, you're obviously a much bigger person than me. Going on to say, once I found out he, meaning her husband, had been screwing her every Wednesday morning in our bed for 16 months. There was no way I was staying with him. She went on to say, that bastard screwed her on Valentine's Day, my birthday, Christmas Eve, and our anniversary, and then came home and screwed me. I was, of course, stunned by this info, but just listened, he says. She then said, karma is a bitch, though, as his life has been terrible since our divorce. Mrs. Jones said her ex-husband was fired from his job for using work time to have the affair after she reported him. So this guy must have been leaving work, going home, meeting with the poster's wife, doing their business, and then going back to the office. Just totally disgusting. After the firing, the company discovered he, her husband, a VP of sales, had been committing commission fraud for over 5 years, submitting fake sales. The company filed criminal and civil charges against him and sued him for restitution of over $240,000. I mean, that is a ton of money. And normally companies don't file criminal charges, so there must have been something very nefarious about what he did. They dropped criminal charges based on him making immediate restitution of the amount requested. The restitution settlement and attorney fees wiped out most of his divorce settlement. So not only did this guy lose his job, he lost all his money, he lost his family. She said he moved to Orlando, Florida, the Orlando, Florida area, to try to start over, but was forced into bankruptcy. Mrs. Jones said he suffered a massive heart attack last year, and his heart was badly damaged, where he now has very limited mobility, suffers from leg swelling, that's not a good sign when you have heart problems, and walks with a cane, and was forced into retirement at age 66. He recently turned 68. Yes, the OP says here, when I say OP, I'm talking about the original poster, the poster of the story. Yes, that's 30 years older than my wife. So she would have been, or he would have been 55 when this affair happened. And the poster's wife would have been 25. Wow. Mrs. Jones said now he's a lonely, broke old man whose 2 children hate him. She said, I have never wished ill on him and have always encouraged our children to have a healthy relationship with their father, but they can't stand him. Finally, she said she got remarried 8 years ago and is happier now than she has ever been in her life. Well, good for her. She deserved it after that nightmare of a husband that she was married to. We exchanged phone numbers, and she said if I ever wanted details pertaining to the affair or want copies of the emails, she will be happy to provide them. Now, OP, original poster, you should have got that information 13 years ago from her. That's when you needed to get that information. I thanked her, wished her well, and we parted. I was, of course, numb at this point as my wife blatantly lied to me. Our entire second marriage was built on a lie. It was not a week-long affair. Rather, she had a totally parallel life with this piece of shit for 16 months. Effing him on days, now listen to this, effing him on days when our parents were babysitting our kids so she could get household work and shopping done. So this was happening every Wednesday. So either his parents or her parents were watching the kids so she could get some work done at the house. Meanwhile, she was out effing this guy. Just disgusting and disrespectful. Ugh. I was not sad hearing this news, but instead I was disgusted and full of rage and anger. Anger like I had never felt before. This level of anger really concerned me, and I knew I couldn't go home at this point as I didn't know if I can control myself. Now that was a smart thing because you never want to get into a situation where you're full of rage and anger. If you get in a situation like that, you always want to step away, gain control, get calm. You never want to employ any kind of violence, of course, unless it's a situation where your life is being threatened, or you never want to get into a verbal altercation or discussion with someone when you're full of rage and anger, So that's very critical and very smart that he said, hey, I didn't want to go home right now because I didn't know if I could control myself. That's the last thing you want to do. Physical violence never should be taking place regardless of the situation, unless, again, it's self-defense. I instead texted my wife and said I was going to do some additional shopping and would be picking up something at a fast food drive-thru, so I would not be home for lunch. I then used the next 4 hours to come up with a plan of how I was going to confront my wife, what actions I was going to take, and posted my story here for feedback. My wife has called and texted me several times just checking in. I told her I was just doing a little shopping and that I'd surprise her when I got home. Now what he did there was kind of give her a red herring. And what I mean by that is a red herring is a term that's oftentimes used when you want to take somebody off of your trail of what you're really up to. So he may have thought, well, she might be getting a little suspicious because I never do shopping. So I'm going to tell her, hey, I'm out here shopping and I'm going to surprise you. And ma'am, you are going to get a surprise when he comes home, because you're not going to be getting chocolates or flowers or a piece of jewelry. You're going to be getting a piece of his mind. She sounded a little suspicious and concerned because I normally don't shop much, but said, okay, I love you. See you when you get here. Now, what he goes through here is the plan of action that he came up with that afternoon. He said, first, I'm going to confront my wife this evening, Saturday. Move her stuff into the spare bedroom. So if you recall in story 1, that's what they did. He didn't move her stuff. He made her sleep in the spare bedroom, but he kept her stuff in the master bedroom. Now he's saying, I'm going to be moving her stuff into the spare bedroom. Tell our kids tomorrow. Tell our parents on Labor Day. Meet with an attorney on Tuesday to draft an in-house separation agreement. He says here, at the end of 90 days, I'll make the decision, 1, to reconcile, or 2, to divorce, or a third option, to extend the evaluation period by another 90 days. Now, here's an update from October 14th. So he wrote the original story on September 3rd, Saturday, September 3rd. Now, this is Friday, October 14th, so about 6 weeks later. So let's see what's happened in his life during that time. He said, I wanted to come back last month and provide an update, but a lot has happened in both my personal and professional life recently. First, on the career side, he said, I'm getting this out of the way before I tell you what you came here for. I was recently promoted to Vice President of Customer Service. After working for 5 years at the internet service provider, I took a customer care manager position at a large privately held industrial company. Over the past 13 years, I've steadily worked my way up the ladder to the top position in the department. My family and my employees are very excited for me, and I feel great knowing my years of hard work have been recognized and rewarded. Well, congratulations for you. You're obviously a great employee, and your company recognized that and rewarded you. This new job requires both in-state and out-of-state travel, but that will be a welcome distraction to get me through the personal challenges I am sure to face over the next year or so. Now, here's the update on the personal side, what everybody is waiting to hear. He says, I confronted my wife and she confessed to everything. She said she didn't tell me the full story 13 years ago because I would have divorced her. The affair lasted for 16 months. They first reconnected while in line at a national coffee house. And I'm sure you know what coffee house that is, where she goes every day. They started meeting there every Wednesday to talk about the company where they worked. Original poster, they were not talking about the company where they worked. Maybe they did that the first meeting, but after that, there was no talk about the company, believe me. On their third meetup, he invited her to his house to see his new exercise spin bike. Oh yeah, he definitely invited her there to see that. She said she knew it was wrong and knew what was going to happen, but she couldn't stop herself. Oh, you could have stopped yourself. You could have said, oh, you know what? No, I don't think that would be appropriate. I'm married and I shouldn't be alone with you. I really shouldn't be even talking to you here at the coffee shop. But of course she went. She said their first time was on a sofa in their basement, but after that they did it in his marital bed. I mean, what total disrespect. This is from a wife, screwing a guy who's married in that other, wife's marital bed. Just totally disgusting. And I'll tell you what, to me, this whole story is disturbing. She then confessed, saying they did everything and never used condoms. I wish I didn't ask this question, he says, as my soul was crushed beyond repair at this point. Now, listen to what she says here. She said, even though she was unfaithful, she made sure I was totally satisfied sexually during the affair and pointed out how she initiated all the time and gave me everything I wanted. And he puts multiple question marks there. I told her that doing so makes the whole situation even more disgusting and disturbing. Yeah, it does. It almost seems like she is psychopathic. I then told her I believe she had or has an underlying mental illness, as a person of sound mind would never do something so cruel to their husband and their family. Now remember, this all happened 13 years ago, but to him, all of this is fresh, because this is the first time he's hearing about this affair lasting for 16 months. So he's approaching this like, hey, man, this is new information, and this is fresh for me, even though for you, this was 13 years ago. I'm just learning this now. She agreed and cried, saying she wanted desperately to end the affair, but just couldn't do it until it was discovered, which she said scared her sane again. Well, ma'am, you could have ended the affair at any time, and guess what? You could have not started it. And guess what? You shouldn't have talked to that guy beyond just saying, hey, how are you in the line at the coffee house? See you later. Bye. No, you wanted to do this. She said she only ever loved me and had absolutely no feelings for him. I told her that was total and complete bullshit. As you can't, as he says here, you can't F someone for 16 months and not have strong feelings for that person. True. That is very true. She insisted she didn't throughout the conversation. And throughout the conversation, she was crying, begging my forgiveness, and asking me to please focus on the beautiful life we've had over the past 11 years. She said, I always made sure I was a great wife and mom, even when I was having the affair. And he puts multiple question marks again. And what that's saying is he's doubting this. He said, I asked her if she was serious about what she just said, and she looked puzzled. I said, that's like a professional thief telling a judge, Judge, I've been an upstanding and law-abiding citizen over the past 16 months, except for the banks I robbed every Wednesday morning. And that is a good analogy right there, because basically what she's saying is, hey, even though I was having this affair every Wednesday with this guy for an hour or whatever, the rest of the time I was great to you and the kids, so I was a good mom, I was a good wife. I told her she definitely wasn't a good wife and mother back then, and in fact, she was terrible. She sobbed and agreed and said, I think I need psychiatric help and therapy. She then asked if I'd help her through this journey. I said, we'll discuss it. When I asked her why she decided to F him, she cried and said, please stop saying that to me. I feel so terrible and I've paid mentally for this for 13 years. I said, tell me why you did that. She said, I was young and impressionable and isolated as a stay-at-home mom, and he was this mature man who was the most respected and successful man in the company, and I couldn't believe he was taking an interest in me. I know it was stupid and terribly wrong, but you wanted to know the truth. Hearing this was a gut punch, but I thanked her for being honest. I then told her, you know you are a homewrecker. She looked at me with a sad, puzzled stare. I then told her that the Joneses divorced shortly after their affair and that his kids don't speak to him. She cried and said, that's awful. I feel so terrible for doing what I did. I asked, you didn't know this? She said, no, I completely blocked him from my mind after you confronted me. I then said, you probably are not aware of your lover's condition, are you? She said, stop calling him that. You are my lover and have been for 19 years and always will be. I said, Mr. Jones suffered a major heart attack and is in failing health, living in Florida. She said, I don't wish ill on anyone, but why are you telling me this? I said, I thought you'd want to know about someone you were in love with. She said, stop it, I never loved him. She said, I've moved on and want to forget about those dark days. I then took a cheap shot at her and said, well, if things don't work out for us, I'm sure he'd appreciate having his young side piece back to help him wipe his ass and wash and empty his balls. Ooh, boy, that was a low blow there. With this, she cried and ran up to our bedroom, threw herself on the bed, and cried for an hour. I felt bad and was going to apologize. See, this guy deep down is a really good guy. And this is a key lesson here of what happens if you stay with a toxic person, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a friend, whether it's a family member. That person is going to rub off on you. So what he just said there probably was totally out of character for him. But what's happened, being around her and her toxicity. Now, again, this was 13 years ago, okay, when this happened. But she was dishonest. If she would have told him about that 13 years ago, he probably wouldn't be saying these things today. But when you hang around someone like that, eventually that's going to rub off on you. There's an old Italian saying that if you play with the pigs, you're going to get dirty. And that's what's happened to him here. He said, I felt bad and was going to apologize, but stopped myself as this was a small dig compared to what she and her POS lover did to me and Mrs. Jones. I let her cry it out, then went up and said, "Okay, it's time for us to move your stuff to the spare bedroom." She begged and pleaded, but I held firm, and she grudgingly helped me move all of her belongings to the spare bedroom. I'm not going to lie, it was tough. And she was crying, and I shed a lot of tears myself, but did so on bathroom visits as I didn't want to show my emotion in front of her. That's a good move because in story one, he broke down in front of her, which I said that's never a good thing to do in front of a woman. You always want to show strength. The conversation with our kids went as well as could be expected. At first, my wife couldn't face them and wanted me to tell them, but then joined us and actually told them everything herself and held it together. They were angry and disgusted with her and very clingy and concerned for me for the first couple of weeks after the discussion, but are coming around now as we've all spent a lot of time together talking through everything. They both told me they still love their mom very much, but will never see her again the same way, at least not for now. The conversation with our parents was much more difficult than I anticipated. See, he was thinking, I'm sure, the discussion with the kids is going to be more difficult. The kids are 16 and 17. The parents, it's going to be difficult, but they're adults and they'll get through it. But you're going to see here, their parents didn't react well to this. All four of them were visibly shaken, with our moms crying strongly, which then caused our dads to cry, which then led to him crying. At both meetings, we had to take several breaks to regain our composures. What really stuck with them is that they were babysitting for my wife while she was off having S with another man. Somehow both sets of parents felt some level of guilt for this. They are both still very upset with my wife and have not come around. Now, that's after 6 weeks, with the exception of my mother, who has warmed up a little bit. Our dads are totally disgusted with her and are not speaking to her, even though this all happened 13 years ago. Our legal separation agreement is signed and in place. We both decided to live in our house. My wife begged me not to go through with the separation agreement, but I told her it had to be done. Things have gone well at home between us. We're talking daily, and things with our kids are getting back to normal, but no intimacy whatsoever. I have absolutely no desire for her at all. While she is desperate for me, I feel nothing. As stated in my plan, I'm committed to giving this 90 days and making a decision to either 1, divorce, 2, reconcile, or 3, continue to give the separation more time. This will likely be my final update. Come on, man. You've got to come back and give us a final update and let us know what you did here. But I may come back and provide an update on what we decide to do. Please do. It seems feedback from the community is split 50-50 between divorce and reconcile. I want to thank everyone here for listening and responding to my story. You don't know how, or don't realize how much your feedback has helped me work through this. To all the betrayed out there, stay strong. It gets better. Wow, that was one hell of a story, and I do hope he comes back and gives us an update on what he decides to do. Now, I said in story 1, my philosophy is once cheating happens, whether it's a man cheating on a woman cheating on a man, my strong feeling is you need to end the relationship right there, okay? You need to end it right there and move on with your lives. But in this case, he didn't do that. And what I think is going to happen with this guy is he once again is going to stay with his wife, just like he did before. They're going to go through this period where now he's not feeling anything for her and he's, repulsed by her, but slowly he's going to break down, and there's going to be one night when they're alone, they're in the house, and then the magic's going to happen all over again, and they're going to be back together. So with that, I want to hear what you think about this story. Do you think he's going to divorce his wife? Do you think he's going to stay with her? What are your thoughts on this? What would you do if you were in his situation? How do you think he handled this situation? Give us your comments. And if you like this story, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and please subscribe to this great channel and I will talk to you on the next one.